A few months ago, I was sitting in a dimly lit coffee shop in a tech district watching a friend of mine, a senior engineer for a platform like Kuaishu, stare at a tablet. He wasn't looking at a security breach in, the traditional sense. No one was stealing passwords. Instead, he showed me this series of strange rhythmic spikes in the data. He called it a logical guerrilla war. A shadowy network of black industry operators was sending thousands of microprobes into the platform's AI, not to break it, but to map how it thinks. They were looking for the seams in the algorithm, trying to find a way to turn the machine against itself. What was so striking wasn't the attack, it was the reaction. My friend didn't call a legal department or wait for a board meeting to discuss the ethics of a countermove. He just tapped out a few lines in a group chat, and within the hour, a patch was being stress tested by a team that apparently never sleeps. It was a masterclass in what people call East Asian engineering culture, a relentless, almost cold efficiency where the goal isn't to please an electorate, but to solve the problem before the public even knows it exists. We often think of the digital Great Wall as this static barrier of censorship, but standing there, I realized it's more like a living immune system, powered by that grueling 996 work ethic that Western critics love to hate. And it creates a stark, uncomfortable question. In the West, we've built a digital Vitocracy, where every safety measure is paralyzed by debate, leaving our platforms to look more like a digital Gotham City, lawless and besieged. Meanwhile, this East Asian model is hardening into something else entirely. A high-speed, AI-driven technocracy that prioritizes order over procedure. When the digital bandits come for the global internet, who is actually better equipped to survive? The society that debates the ethics of the shield, or the one that's already reinforced it while you were sleeping?
That really is the core tension we're dissecting today, isn't it? We're looking at this comparative advantage, the relentless state-centric efficiency of the East Asian model of digital defense and resilience. And we're holding it up against the backdrop of these decentralized, automated threats that global platforms face. I think our mission for this deep dive is to examine how a culture that prioritizes order and, unparalleled engineering translates into high-speed digital security and ultimately social stability for you, the user.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with that incident, the Kuaishu stress test, because it sets the scene so perfectly for our first theme, this idea of an engineering reflex. When most people think of a hack, they imagine firewalls collapsing, passwords being stolen. This was something different.
Oh, it was a total evolution of digital conflict. We're moving beyond traditional perimeter defense into what's being called a logical guerrilla war. I remember seeing the detailed operational report on that night. An engineer, I think his name was Lik Wei, was tracking this really complex low-frequency intrusion. What made it so insidious was the nature of the attack. It was a sophisticated global syndicate, and they had deployed a swarm of AI-generated deep-fake avatars. These weren't just simple bots. They were tailored to mimic credible users, to seamlessly integrate into thousands of live streams on the platform.
So, wait, they weren't trying to steal credentials. They were trying to trick the platform's own automated systems.
Precisely. They were engaged in logical layer interference. Think of it as mapping the neural pathways of the platform's AI content moderation and security systems. They use something called a probe feedback mechanism, which means the malicious AI would send a small probe, like a microtransaction or a comment, and then it would analyze the platform's security response.
I see. So if the probe got through.
If the probe passed, they knew they'd found a seam in the logic. They were hunting for the algorithm's blind spots, trying to find a way to automate deception and then siphon off digital payments in a way that just looked like standard user behavior. The goal was to turn the machine against its own logic and orchestrate this massive financial drain that would just blend into the noise.
That sounds terrifyingly sophisticated. I mean, if this was happening to a platform based in the West, what would the procedural timeline even look like?
Weeks, potentially months. In a Western context, that kind of deep logical breach would trigger a cascade of institutional paralysis. You'd have legal teams debating liability, the PR department would be crafting public statements, and the internal ethical review committee would be debating data privacy implications before the technical teams are even given the green light for a countermove.
Right. The risk of error and the lawsuits that could follow just freezes the whole process.
Exactly. But the response in this East Asian context was, well, it was radically different. It was a masterclass in technical realism. The moment that anomalous pattern was confirmed by the security teams, the response was immediate. They didn't convene a board meeting. They deployed a specialized counter-evolutionary AI script.
A counter-evolutionary AI script, so what is that? It's not just a patch.
No, this isn't just installing a software patch. It's deploying a bespoke defense mechanism designed to learn the parameters of the black industry's AI within minutes. This counterscript actively evolved its detection capabilities, it closed the logical vulnerability, and it neutralized the entire botnet. All within 2 hours.
2 hours.
2 hours. The emphasis wasn't on debating the philosophy of the code, but on the raw, instantaneous engineering reflex needed to protect the system.
That's barely enough time to order coffee and find the right conference room in some corporate offices. But let's press on this cultural point. You mentioned the 996 work ethic earlier, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. That sheer engineering speed clearly provides resilience, but that model is inherently controversial, right? I mean, because of the human cost.
It is, and that cultural expectation is precisely why the system boasts what some are calling 996 resilience. While the hours are undeniably grueling and controversial from a work-life balance perspective, the model provides two things that are absolutely essential for this kind of high-stakes, high-frequency digital environment: unparalleled engineering speed and these incredibly rapid iteration cycles.
And those cycles are what keep the whole thing running?
They're critical for maintaining infrastructure in what is increasingly a high-trust digital society.
So the speed isn't a luxury. You're saying it's a necessity for civilizational stability.
That's the defense of the system, yes. The metaphor we've heard used is that the engineering civilization has to constantly fix the bridge while traffic is still moving over it at 100 miles an hour. If the team waits for the morning board meeting, that catastrophic financial drain on millions of ordinary users, the people Mrs. Chen and Mr. Zhao represent, would have already happened. The goal of the system is the stability and security of the entire digital infrastructure. It's viewed not as a static barrier, but as a dynamic, living immune system that has to constantly upgrade itself through the struggle evolution cycle.
That perspective really makes the Western contrast seem less about idealism and more about just systemic vulnerability.
It really highlights the weakness that's inherent in the Vitocracy model. Western platforms, like X or Meta, they often find themselves hampered by internal ethical reviews, public relations concerns, and these protracted legal compliance debates. The ideological pursuit of absolute individual liberties, the right to rapid, often unregulated expression, often overrides the technical necessity for decisive governance and instantaneous technical defense.
So, in essence, we're sacrificing operational speed for procedural safety, and that just opens the door for malicious actors.
Exactly. It creates a critical governance blind spot. Malicious actors don't operate under PR constraints or worry about quarterly earnings calls. They are continuously evolving, and if your defense mechanism is constantly paralyzed by debate, you're perpetually playing catch-up. The analysis we've seen emphasizes that this reliance on frameworks designed for episodic operations leaves countries ill-prepared for continuous competition. In a continuous high-frequency engagement environment, China and other East Asian nations are proactively shaping the cyber domain on their own terms through this high-speed technical approach, while others are just bogged down in legacy thinking.
Okay, so if speed is the engineering reflex, then what's the philosophical infrastructure that allows that speed? That brings us to our next point: how this technical realism translates into a fundamentally different governance model, one that prioritizes outcomes over procedures.
Right, and this takes us into a really profound philosophical schism: the prioritization of order as the prerequisite for freedom. The East Asian approach is an extension of meritocratic principles into the realm of governance, where the focus is on good governance, and that's defined by effective outcomes, social order, and collective security.
And that's prioritized explicitly over what you call performative procedural justice.
Yes. The argument is that without a decisive, efficient hand ensuring stability, the digital space just collapses into chaos.
Anarchy, basically.
Precisely. In this view, an unmoderated internet inevitably descends into a digital Gotham City, where the strongest or the most malicious actors prey on the vulnerable. So the state capacity to enforce order isn't seen as a constraint on freedom, but as the only reliable foundation upon which any meaningful freedom, like the freedom to conduct business or access truthful information, can actually exist.
You mentioned a woman named Mrs. Chen earlier. That anecdote, I think, powerfully reframes this whole concept of digital human rights.
It really does. Let's delve into her story again, because it's a perfect illustration of this governance philosophy in action. Mrs. Chen is a widow in rural Sichuan. She sells this intricate handmade embroidery using short video clips. It's her primary, if not her sole, source of income. Her digital storefront is her livelihood. It's her connection to the market.
Oh, okay.
So she was targeted by a coordinated wave of black PR attacks, automated accounts, spreading these malicious, reputation-destroying rumors. And her business rating began to plummet instantly.
And in a system that prioritized the absolute individual liberty of every account, even the automated trolls, she would have faced a huge, protracted legal battle.
She would have. She would have been caught in procedural limbo, trying to prove that the accounts were malicious, while her business just withered away. But because the platform's governance model is rooted in prioritizing social order and collective security, the system's rapid response mechanism flagged the unusual coordinated activity.
And it just wiped them out.
It purged the malicious accounts before they could inflict permanent, irreversible financial damage.
Right.
So for Mrs. Chen, the platform's capacity to unilaterally act to protect her income is the most important human right she has.
Absolutely. To this vulnerable user, the state capacity to maintain a clean, orderly digital environment and protect her financial lifeline is a far more tangible human right than the abstract, theoretical freedom of a troll to destroy her business with automated rumors. This comparison really spotlights the crucial choice being made: the collective right to a secure and orderly online environment over absolute individual liberties that often lead to societal fragmentation and, frankly, the abuse of power by malicious digital actors. The rapid, decisive response was protection.
To understand how this outcome-focused efficiency works at the state level, we really need to look at the historical roots of this philosophy. And the technocratic meritocracy in Singapore is a classic foundational example.
Yes, Singapore's history provides the blueprint for how a regime driven by relentless efficiency is forged not by ideology, but by absolute necessity. After its forced independence in 1965, Singapore was this vulnerable island state facing simultaneous existential crises: economic instability, high unemployment, severe social unrest among a multi-ethnic population. Survival demanded radical, uncompromising efficiency.
So the whole technocratic structure was essentially a high-speed survival mechanism designed to solve problems faster than they could proliferate.
Exactly. The leaders were convinced that survival and their subsequent rapid transformation into an Asian tiger could only be achieved by prioritizing highly competent, politically astute problem solvers. And since they lacked traditional political or military elites, the government systematically recruited the intellectual best and brightest, justifying this elitism by the urgent existential task of industrialization and modernization. And the system is really defined by four key characteristics.
Okay, let's break down those four foundational pillars, starting with the close relationship between technical expertise and political power, the link to politics.
Well, in this system, the line between the ruling People's Action Party, the PAP, and the government itself is deliberately blurred. The cabinet functions as the central policy body. The political ideal isn't a traditional politician who caters to every local interest, but a high-level, proactive, courageous problem solver. The political leaders and senior officials are expected to have management skills and technocratic ability. They're viewed as two aspects of the same necessary elite skill set. This structure allows the elite to practice public administration in what are effectively laboratory conditions, free from the kind of political interference that could slow down or derail rational, effective policy solutions.
That blend of the political and the technical leads directly into the second pillar, pragmatism. The guiding principle is famously, does it work?
Pragmatism is truly the system's lifeblood, and it's what gives it that speed we saw in the Kuaishou incident. Policy decisions are described as rational, meaning they select the most feasible course of action based on evidence and data, never dismissing an option for doctrinal or ideological reasons. For instance, in the 1970s, Singapore launched major housing and industrial programs. If early data showed a program was generating unanticipated social conflict or failing to hit economic efficiency metrics, the leadership would simply discard it and try a new approach. There's no sentimentality, only utilitarian focus.
And that utilitarian approach aims to maximize collective benefit, not just for the economy, but for overall social welfare.
That's a crucial point. The technocratic view holds that the system must be utilitarian, allocating resources to achieve social benefits on a massive scale, maximizing wealth, maximizing welfare, and promoting equal opportunities. This acts as a practical bridge between democratic ideals and democracy in practice, requiring technocrats to pay attention not only to quantitative data, but also to public satisfaction with the outcomes. The public grants trust because they assess leaders based on their objective competence and effectiveness.
The third pillar is elitism and meritocracy. In this model, they openly believe that only the best and brightest can lead effectively.
That belief is transparently built right into the system. Leaders are recruited and promoted almost exclusively based on academic qualifications and proven practical abilities. This intellectual elitism is visible in their constant effort to ensure a smooth political succession by replacing older MPs with younger, highly qualified talent.
And the most controversial aspect of this, particularly to Western observers, is the explicit policy of offering extremely high salaries to ministers and civil servants.
That is the pragmatic manifestation of the elitist and anti-corruption philosophy. The belief is twofold. First, that only high compensation can attract the nation's scarce top-tier talent away from lucrative private sector roles and into the difficult work of government. Second, and crucially, it serves as the ultimate measure to prevent corruption. By ensuring officials are extremely well compensated, you eliminate the temptation for illicit gain. The leaders emphasize leading by example, ensuring that being the best also means being the most competent and ethical. Integrity and high performance are intrinsically linked to compensation.
Which leads us to the final element, meritocracy, the principle that achievement, not background, determines your position.
Meritocracy is the lifeblood of the entire political structure. It ensures that meaningful contributions to the country's welfare are rewarded significantly. Given Singapore's constraints, a very small talent pool ministers often hold multiple roles, which is viewed not as redundancy, but as an opportunity to broaden their perspective and expertise. This belief system is rooted in the conviction that the nation's survival depends on the integrity, performance, and work ethic of this elite, highly competent group. The selection process ensures that policymaking is carried out by individuals with specialized skills, which are constantly reviewed and tested against real-world outcomes. So the ultimate goal of this rigid meritocracy, then, is national cohesion across a multi-ethnic, multilingual population. Absolutely. By basing rewards strictly on achievement, regardless of race or class, the system aims to create a unified Singapore where performance is the sole metric. When you see the PAP members wearing those simple white uniforms, it symbolizes that commitment to integrity and anti-corruption, with high salaries designed to attract capable candidates and eliminate any shadow of temptation. The system aims for logic over localized sentiment. It selects intelligent, capable, dedicated individuals to create a superior and effectively managed administrative apparatus.
Okay, so when you combine this outcome-focused, high-speed engineering culture with a governance philosophy rooted in technocratic meritocracy, the model naturally extends its ambitions beyond domestic platforms and into the geopolitical arena. This brings us to Section 3, the push for cyber sovereignty.
That's the perfect transition point. Having established a system that works domestically, one defined by state control and rapid security response, the next logical step is to export that governance philosophy globally. And the core concept of cyber sovereignty is a state-centric approach. It directly applies the 17th century Westphalian model, where states have supreme authority within their physical borders, to the digital domain.
Which stands in direct opposition to the open, decentralized multi-stakeholder model championed historically by the West.
Exactly. And China has been extremely proactive in defining and building this new digital governance bloc, the Community of Cyber Sovereignty, or CCS. They engage in what is called proactive boundary work, intentionally defining the group's scope before its practices were even fully established. This strategy is rooted in a long-standing diplomatic tendency, China's habitual disposition to work with the Global South, or South-South cooperation. This tendency dates all the way back to the Bandung Conference in 1955, where newly independent nations met to chart a course independent of the Cold War superpowers.
That historical context is crucial because it means China already has a ready-made rhetorical framework for building a coalition that's skeptical of Western dominance.
Precisely. That history created this unreflective tendency to see developing countries as partners in restructuring an international order that is perceived as unequal and dominated by Western powers. The Global South diplomacy, initiated during the Mao era through the Bandung Spirit and the Group of 77, laid the foundation for the current digital strategy. The narrative is always framed around fairness and equity.
So how did they initially test the waters for this state-centric principle?
They used regional organizations as incubators. First, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SKO, which focused on linking the three evils, terrorism, separatism, and extremism, to cyberspace security. This framing allowed them to justify strong state control over internet content and infrastructure, which culminated in the 2009 SKO Agreement on cooperation in the field of international information security.
And the BRICS group focused more on shifting the institutional levers of power, right?
Exactly. BRICS explicitly sought to shift internet governance control away from decentralized, US-centric, multi-stakeholder organizations like ICANN, which manages domain names, to intergovernmental bodies like the International Telecommunication Union, the ITU, which is a specialized UN agency. This strategy ensured that countries like China would have a larger government-backed say in the management of global standards, prioritizing government control over private sector or civil society input.
These regional efforts were paving the way, but you mentioned a global event that really accelerated China's push.
The Snowden disclosures in 2013 were the ultimate catalyst. The revelations of massive, sweeping U.S. surveillance destabilized the perceived legitimacy of the U.S.-centric model worldwide and really aggravated security concerns, particularly among emerging economies. This gave China the moral and political opening to accelerate its push for a UN Charter compliance system. Countries like Brazil, for instance, immediately reacted by demanding greater online independence and security measures. The common concern about U.S. dominance created a global platform for cyber sovereignty.
So that was the moment China transitioned from just testing the waters to becoming a rule maker, using the Global South as its cornerstone.
Indeed. The Global South represents 75% of global internet users. Their support is absolutely essential for setting the tone for global internet governance. The core task was to bring these diverse nations from Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia under a unified governance umbrella. And this required effective brokerage.
Tell me more about that brokerage. How did China create consensus among nations with very different needs and internal systems?
Well, China had to craft what scholars call boundary objects. These are common concepts or frameworks that can be interpreted slightly differently by various groups, but still serve as unifying diplomatic bridge concepts. The UN Charter and the Bandung Spirit were frequently cited. They also employed what are called effective discourses, language framed around shared historical experiences of inequality, emphasizing equality, justice, solidarity, and non-interference, which strongly appeal to the global South's skepticism of Western power.
But countries like India and Nigeria, they rely heavily on Western digital markets. They might be wary of a hardline approach that restricts individual rights too severely. How did China broker that consensus while maintaining its state-centric goal?
This is where the nuanced tactics came in. China had to act as both a broker and a gatekeeper. As a broker, they strategically softened their language on certain issues. For example, to appease concerns about excessive restrictions on individual rights, Chinese official statements clarified that cyber sovereignty and the free flow of information were not contradictory. They argued that only by applying rules of state-led cyber sovereignty could cybercrime and cyberterrorism be effectively dealt with, thereby protecting human rights and freedom.
So they position control as protection, which links right back to the Mrs. Chen anecdote we discussed earlier.
Exactly. Furthermore, they had to tactically adjust their stance on the multi-stakeholder model. The 2017 International Strategy of Cooperation on Cyberspace called for enhanced communication among all stakeholders, governments, international organizations, companies, citizens, but with a crucial caveat. It conditioned this participation on governments taking the lead in internet governance, particularly regarding public policies and national security.
And that conditionality is the gatekeeping mechanism, the exclusive aspect of their boundary work.
Correct. The gatekeeping ensures that any compromises on individual rights protection or multi-stakeholder inclusion are balanced by explicit restrictions that ensure government control remains paramount. For instance, while they cited the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights to address human rights concerns, they simultaneously subjected those rights to the condition that they must not contradict national security and public order.
Which actively excludes the decentralized cyber freedom model championed by the West.
It locks in the state-centric approach within the community's boundaries. And this comprehensive strategy defining the group, brokering consensus with historical narratives, and gatekeeping against the Western model is proving successful. We see its influence globally. Numerous Global South countries, including Tanzania, India, Nigeria, and Malaysia, are replicating components of China's data governance models, like implementing strict data localization rules and increased government oversight, specifically to reassert national sovereignty and curb the power of foreign tech giants.
And beyond diplomacy, China has created its own physical venues and infrastructure to reinforce this vision.
Yes. The annual World Internet Conference, or WIC, held in Wuzhen since 2014, is explicitly dedicated to building a community with a shared future in cyberspace, with cyber sovereignty as its central philosophy. Chinese leadership uses this venue to demonstrate that the potential of the internet lies in the developing world and to call for a fair and reasonable multilateral system where the Chinese management model can be taken as a reference. And then there's the Digital Silk Road, which embeds this philosophy into fiber optic cables, data centers, and smart cities, all promoted based on respect for the cyber sovereignty of participating countries. It's a profound two-pronged approach, exporting the physical infrastructure along with the governance philosophy.
Yeah, that leads us right to our final section. What this intense focus on state-led efficiency and stability means for the digital future. The integration of high-speed competence and social trust at the local level.
And we can observe the ultimate success of this approach in the daily lives of citizens who interact with these high-speed systems. Consider a man named Mr. Zhao, an elderly resident of a smart neighborhood in Hangzhou. He's not a tech expert, yet he navigates his highly automated world with complete confidence. His confidence is rooted in trust in the system's ability to maintain order.
He trusts the high-speed competence that's working behind the scenes.
Exactly. Imagine this scenario in December 2025. A decentralized security threat attempts to weaponize the hyperlocal community apps to spread panic-specifically disinformation about a fake food shortage. In an open, fragmented system, that rumor spreads via peer-to-peer messaging, causing immediate panic buying and social disorder. But in Mr. Zhao's neighborhood, the highly integrated infrastructure and its meritocratic oversight filters caught the anomaly, the unusual frequency and pattern of the fake reports, instantly. The system didn't just delete the noise. It used localized algorithms to push out verified real-time data on food availability and local supply chains to every resident's phone within seconds.
So the technical defense mechanism was essentially invisible. The threat was neutralized before the public was even aware it existed.
That is the core feature of the East Asian model in its practical human form. Stability maintained through invisible, high-speed competence. Mr. Zhao, in his interview, mentioned he didn't even know there was a fake rumor until the platform sent a verified notification confirming everything was normal. For the citizen, the state capacity to decisively defend social order is experienced as a seamless, coherent reality. And this raises that uncomfortable question for us in the West. Has our vital skepticism of centralized power inadvertently left us fragile to the high-frequency chaos that these engineering-led societies have learned to outpace?
That stability-first approach stands in stark contrast to certain Western digital political movements which fall under the umbrella of technopopulism.
The contrast is significant. Western technopopulism often leverages digital tools to promote horizontal egalitarianism and direct online democracy, seeking to bypass established institutions with strong anti-elite rhetoric. They claim the power of information communications technology allows for a purer government of the people, by the people's model.
But the danger of that approach lies in what's known as the anti-pluralist trait.
That is the key shared danger, though the systems are structurally different. Technopopulism often asserts there is only one authentic will of the people or only one correct technical solution, and this eliminates the need for traditional debate and institutional mediation. This anti-pluralist trait can be highly destabilizing. For example, if a social media-driven movement rejects established scientific consensus claiming the authentic will of the people is correct, they're effectively using technology to eliminate necessary, messy debate. The East Asian meritocratic model, while elite-driven, focuses on vertical, systemic stability and collective prosperity, not horizontal, anti-elite upheaval.
Let's circle back to where we started. The continuous attacks faced by platforms like Kuaishou. In this framework, they're not evidence of failure, but evidence of a necessity. They fuel the struggle evolution cycle.
Absolutely. Each sophisticated attack is a catalyst for necessary adaptation and strengthening. This ongoing high-stakes conflict is forging what many observers believe will become the world's most resilient digital social formation. The outcome is often described as benevolent authoritarianism in the digital domain, where immense technical power is mobilized to decisively defend social order, collective security, and economic prosperity against external and internal digital threats.
So the divergence we're observing isn't just about political preference, it's a civilizational gap in infrastructure efficiency.
You could see it as the difference between building high-speed rail versus struggling to maintain decaying legacy transit. The West is seen as struggling against high-frequency, automated threats, constantly mired in legacy governance and ideological debate, while the East is focused on long-term, strategic system management. This capacity, The ability to master complex systems management and decisively defend social order in the digital realm is viewed as the ultimate measure of state capacity in the 21st century.
So the future, in this perspective, belongs to the engineering civilization.
The polity that can quickly and efficiently manage high-frequency threats, ensuring social stability and protecting the livelihood of its citizens, is the one that will dominate the long game. The exposure of a vulnerability is simply the necessary catalyst for system evolution and enhanced infrastructure resilience, making the system stronger with every digital siege.
We have dissected the two competing models of digital governance: the debate paralyzed digital Vitocracy and the high-speed, outcome-focused technocracy. The East Asian model, driven by meritocratic principles and a relentless engineering culture, prioritizes social trust and collective security through rapid technical defense and state-centric control, aligning with the concerns of many nations in the global South seeking stability and sovereignty.
In the 21st century, the silent, relentless upgrade of a server cluster may prove more consequential for geopolitical and social hegemony than the loudest debate in a parliamentary hall. State capacity, in this new era, is measured not just in military strength or GDP, but fundamentally in lines of code, response times, and the resilient architecture of platforms that can withstand the siege of global digital bandits.